Hi, and welcome back to Fire Talks. This is Chris Brunette. I'm Chief of Fire and Life Safety with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. This time on Fire Talks, we're going to be talking about the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code and what DFPC is doing to support jurisdictions with the enforcement of that code. Joining me today is Bill Bischoff. You've met him before, but I'll let him introduce himself here in just a second. But he is our building codes branch chief. He's been with us since the inception of DFPC, actually before that, but I'll let him tell you about that. So, Bill, I know you've introduced yourself to our listeners before, but can you again and just give a little bit of your background?
I can and I will. As Chris said, I'm Bill Bischoff, and I'm the current building code branch chief in the Fire and Life Safety section within the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And I started out a long time ago. Right out of high school, I served a 4-year carpentry apprenticeship and then had a number of years in construction, working my way up to journeyman and then superintendent on projects, the project manager on other projects, and then went into inspections. I started out with Mesa County Building Department in Grand Junction, Colorado. And from there, I moved over to the state. And at the time, it was a public school construction program within Oil and Public Safety that is part of the Department of Labor and Employment. And through a legislative move, the public school construction program was moved over to the Division of Fire Safety, as the division was called at that time, so that there'd be one house for permitting for both fire and construction permits for public schools. And the rest is just what we do now.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm interested, Bill, when the program came over to the Division of Fire Safety at that time, how many people were associated with the program?
7 or 8 people were associated with just the building permitting at that time when we came over. And in the Division of Fire Safety, there was actually including upper management, there was 4 people at that time.
So for the entire program, it was 10 to 12 people to
Correct.
conduct both building and fire. And now today, our building codes branch, we're about to be 13 in that branch before we add the resiliency code enforcement team. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, but it just shows that the state continues to grow, and our obligation to help out our local jurisdictions continues to grow. And so that's what we're all about. And I would like to talk a little bit today about this new Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, but for those who haven't, maybe I'll just dive a little bit into the background of that code and how it came about. So I'll try and keep it brief, but I think it's important to back up to, well, even before the Marshall Fire. So prior to the Marshall Fire, I think it became very apparent in Colorado that the wildfire problem was becoming more and more an issue, to the point that the governor in 2021 wrote a letter to the Colorado Fire Commission saying exactly that we have a growing problem in Colorado with wildfire. And the Fire Commission, he asked them to make a recommendation on how to start to approach reducing the risks associated with wildland fire. And so the Fire Commission set out to do just that. And the first thing they did was they created a subcommittee for wildland fire, and tasked that subcommittee with really addressing this issue. At one point, that subcommittee grew to, about 75 people. And they came from all walks of life. It wasn't just people with a fire background. We had insurance involved. We had commissioners, county commissioners, fire marshals, building code officials, you name it. There were people from all over the state and all over as far as backgrounds go, trying to figure this issue out. Well, what they finally came to an agreement on was that if we're going to reduce these risks in Colorado, we have to address it both with vegetation management, but also with structure hardening. And so with that, their recommendation was to create a Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code board that would come up with a code for Colorado that would apply throughout Colorado in the wildland urban interface, and have local jurisdictions support the creation and implementation of that code. So that recommendation went to the Fire Commission, who with a supermajority approved it and moved it on as a recommendation to the legislature. And then in 2023, Senators Cutter and Exum picked up that recommendation and created Senate Bill 166. 166 went through several iterations, but eventually did pass both sides of the legislature, so the House and the Senate, and was signed by the governor into law in May of 2023. What that did is it created a 24-person board with 21 voting members. Again, those members are appointed by several members of the legislature, as well as our big boss, the executive director of the Department of Public Safety. And those 21 voting members come from different backgrounds, different walks of life. But one of the big things is the bill made sure to outline that those individuals had to come from all over the state. They couldn't just be centered in, say, the Denver metro area. So in addition to those 21 voting members, there are 3 ex officio members who are non-voting that represent certain agencies in the state. One being me. I represent the Department of Public Safety on that board. We also have the State Forest Service represented, as well as the Office of Resiliency in DOLA, represented as a non-voting member. And so with that, the board was stood up in October of 2023, and they had essentially about a year and a half to create and adopt a code for Colorado, which they did. And now local jurisdictions throughout Colorado who have wildland urban interface within their boundaries have to adopt this code and start enforcing it by July 1st of 2026. So that's a very quick overview, but I wanted to get that out there as we move into talking about DFPC and the team that we're trying to create here. So Bill, do you have anything to add to what I just, the background I just shared there?
Just very little bit that there are a number of committees, and the Wildfire Resiliency Code Administrator is part of DFPC, and she coordinated those meetings, and they went on for year and a half or 2 years over the different aspects of the code. And so there was a lot of input into the writing of the code.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make, because this board didn't just work in a silo. They didn't operate by themselves. So they did seek out the support and input from a variety of stakeholders. And I think those subcommittees were probably the biggest contributors to making sure that we created a code that really is going to work for Colorado. So thanks for bringing that up, Bill.
Certainly.
So I think, to kind of move into what we're doing at DFPC, I think you have to understand that part of Senate Bill 166 stated that where a local jurisdiction doesn't have the means or mechanisms to adopt and enforce this code, they could request help from DFPC. And so that's really what I'm wanting to talk about today is how are we going to help here with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control? I will say that for the past couple of years, we've recognized that we had this obligation, and we've been trying to get the resources and the finances in place to be able to offer assistance. It's a tough time with Colorado state government to be asking for resources and money. And so it took a while. In fact, we didn't get approved for finances or the full-time employees that we need actually until the current long bill just passed here in 2026. So with that, we were kind of in a place of wanting to assist, but not really knowing how we were going to be able to assist until we did get approval for the finances in those positions. But I am happy to say that we were able to acquire 5 positions and the budget to go along with that. And so that's where we'll really get into what this program looks like. And why I have Bill joining me today is because this Wildfire Resiliency Code, as we talked about just a minute ago, has a lot to do with building hardening or the construction that goes into a building to protect it from a fire on the exterior. And with that, it just makes sense that the Building Codes branch would be the place for this team to land. And so we're going to be bringing this team on and create a new unit within the Building Codes branch to operate and assist local jurisdictions with the enforcement of this code. So, Bill, can you just take a minute and tell us a little bit about your vision for that team and what you think it will operate as and how it will operate within your branch?
Well, it'll operate as a separate unit. I think the long-term plan is to create a separate branch. In our section right now, we have 4 separate and distinct branches that we work very well together. And so the long-term would be to create a separate branch for the Wildfire Resiliency Code group. But in the meantime, as Chris was saying, because of budgets and strengths, we're able to get 5 people or the means to hire 5 individuals to join this team. And so it just made sense to put it under the Building Code branch. And so what we'll be doing is at the beginning, we'll be feeling it out really is what and see where it's going to go, what kind of requests for assistance we start getting. Right now, we're going to be primarily focused on providing plan review. And if we can, we'll be doing inspections. But again, it depends on how many and what type of requests for assistance we'll be getting. We're going to be creating documents for the use of the unit so that everybody understands what our role will be or what their role will be and what the role of the local governing adopting body is. We'll be hiring a unit chief, which will be the supervisory head of that unit. And they'll be working primarily as a self-contained unit with help from us who have been here for a while, to get to learn the system of working in the state and how we have different roles to play in.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point there, Bill, that this team will be joining a well-seasoned team. Your Building Codes branch has been operating since, before the Division of Fire Prevention and Control was created. And so there's so much to learn from the team that you've assembled. And I think that this team is going to benefit from all the knowledge and background that your team has to offer. To your point, operating within the state system is a little different than operating anywhere else in Colorado. I think both you and I have operated at the local level, either municipal or county or special district level, and those work a little bit differently than we work here at the state. So I have no doubt that the people we bring on are going to have a little bit of a learning curve, but with the support and backing of the team that you have currently, I have no doubt they'll be brought on board very quickly. As far as that goes, I also want to just point out that to help guide the support that this team is going to be giving our local jurisdictions, we recently promulgated new rules. Those rules are titled the Inspection and Enforcement Support of Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Codes, and that can be found in the Colorado Code of Regulations under 8 CCR 1507-61. Now, if you go and look for those right now, as of the date that we're recording this, which is the end of May, you won't see that in the published Colorado Code of Regulations. We don't expect that they're going to go into effect until about July 15th of this year. That's because there's a whole process that the rules have to go through. But I will say that our Director Mike Morgan with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, he has signed those rules. And so now we're just waiting for them to be approved by various other entities. That's why it's going to take until July 15th to do that. But just know that those rules are coming, and they really outline how and when we're going to provide services to and for local jurisdictions. But with that in mind, Bill, how do you kind of see this process going from kind of standing up the team to them getting out and providing services to local jurisdictions? And I guess let's start with, how will the local jurisdictions request this assistance from us?
I'm envisioning that it will be a type of application or a type of request similar to a memorandum of understanding, where they would ask us to come in and be the enforcement agent for their code official, their local code official. And if they don't feel that they're qualified to act as the code official, we'll have another document where they can ask us to enforce and take on the duties of the code official, which would be interpretations. Any of the duties listed in the code for the code official, which would be interpretations, the ground truthing, which is asking for a different hazard level on a certain parcel, and that's all in the code. I'm getting kind of deep into the weeds there, and I didn't mean to. But what we'll be doing is filtering those and seeing who we can assist and who applies for assistance.
Yeah. No, and I think you bring up a really good point there, though, in that the statute really just laid out that DFPC would assist local jurisdictions with enforcement. But we recognize that we have many local jurisdictions who may not be ready to take on the role of a code official. But when adopting this code, right there in Chapter 1 of the code, it lays out all the responsibilities of the code enforcement or of the code official. And so we are prepared to take on that responsibility and that role for a local jurisdiction if they need us to. I think we all eventually would like to see our local agencies take on the role of code official and even be able to take on enforcement. But until they're ready for that, we want to support them however we can. And that might include us playing the role of code official for them. And so in order to do that, we're going to have some transfer of responsibility from the local jurisdiction to DFPC. And I know you and your team are currently working on what that looks like. And of course, we'll get that to the AG's office for review and approval before we actually institute it. But I think there was a lot of thought that went into that, and I'm glad that your team's on top of that, Bill.
Yeah, I'm glad they are too. And right now, the vision is that this will be a yearly agreement, and of course, either party could make it shorter if they so desired. Like if a local jurisdiction needs help for the first 6 months after adopting, we would be more than willing to jump in for that period of time, and until they're able to enforce on their own.
Yeah, no, I think that's very wise to do those short kind of annual time periods, because we really do. We want to support the local jurisdictions in doing this on their own at some point. And we understand that there might be some that they just never get to that point. But those that we can support in getting to that point, we're going to do that. And I think with that in mind, it's probably relevant to bring up that also within our section within the division, we were able to hire a couple of educators under a grant that we received. And those educators' sole responsibility is to assist local jurisdictions with the adoption and then the implementation of this code. And so, different from what we're talking about here, they will not be helping with enforcement. But what these two educators can do is help with the adoption at the local level. And then once adopted, they can help train up the workforce at that local level to start to enforce this on their own. And so I think this is a two-tiered approach where Bill and his team, they're going to be there to actually provide the assistance with enforcement. But then the educator, the team of two educators that I just talked about, they will be there to help train up that workforce so that one day, if that jurisdiction would like to, they can take over the enforcement responsibilities themselves. And that could include if a local jurisdiction has asked us to take on the role of the code official, they can help prepare somebody to take that role on at that local jurisdictional level too. So I think we're approaching this in two ways, trying to provide as much support as we can with this new code in Colorado. Do you have anything to add to that, Bill?
Just that our initial team is going to be, like was mentioned before, 5 individuals, a unit chief, and then 4 plan reviewers, inspectors, and we'll be probably calling on our educators, especially in the beginning, to walk us through the code and how they see enforcement of the code, because they've been in the code quite a bit now, since January, I believe, is when they first came on board. And so they have quite a bit of experience with the code right now.
Yep. No, that's a really good point. And they probably have more knowledge than anybody in the state on this code and its application. So we'll lean on them pretty heavily, especially when we're onboarding this new team for the division. So as you mentioned, we're getting 5 people to help with this. I don't want to lie to our listeners and say that that's enough. I think we all recognize that there's quite a need out there. And by our estimates, we really thought that we would need about 20 people to do all the work that we're anticipating getting for this. But we are happy to get the 5 that we're getting. And we know that we're going to be able to make a difference out there. So with just 5 individuals, it's going to make it difficult, but I really do think that we're going to be able to make a difference out there with this. It just means that we're going to adjust our implementation and support model. And so with that, I know the services we offer are going to change a little bit. Can you talk me through how you think that's going to look with only 5 individuals coming on, Bill?
Yes, and again, it depends on the number of requests we get in for assistance. But right now, just based on what we know and what the assumptions are based on the communication that our educators have had with the various adopting governing bodies, is that we may not have time to go and do inspections. We may just have to do a review, a desk review of these projects, and then have some type of owner's affidavit saying that they've performed all the requirements of the code. Until we know for sure. It would be great if we could say, yeah, we'll do the plan review and then do the inspections for this permit. And one thing I think we ought to bring up is that this will be a separate permit from your local building department building permit. It's the local building department, if you go there and get a permit to build a new residence, and
Right.
it's required that the WRC be enforced, the Wildfire Resiliency Code is enforced. This will be a separate permit if it comes through Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And we will not close it out until we know that the local building is okay to issue a certificate of occupancy. They may not issue that until they get our report saying that they've met everything associated with the Wildfire Resiliency Code. So it's one of the things that it's going to be play it by ear when that time arrives. Which comes first, the building permits or the wildfire resiliency permit?
All really good points. Well, you're listening to Fire Talks, and with me today is Bill Bischoff with our Building Codes branch. We are talking about the new Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code and how DFPC is going to play a role in helping to enforce this at the local jurisdictional level. Bill, you were just talking about how really we've modified our service model so that we can assist local jurisdictions with the 5 individuals that we are now able to hire. And with that, it might depending on how much work comes in, we might be in a place where all we're able to do is desk reviews. But with that, we have affidavits that we can have completed that will the owner or the owner's representative will attest that they had met the requirements of this code and have built to the plans that we've reviewed and approved. But I also think, part of what we wrote into our rules was this opportunity for a delegated wildfire resiliency code inspector. And so I think that gives us another opportunity where, if there's a particular project where we maybe don't have the resources to get eyes on it, we can require that one of these delegated inspectors get their eyes on it and make sure that they're looking at some of those key features that maybe we're concerned about. And so that gives us another opportunity, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and that's a really good point, is that on some of them, like you said, because of the complexity or whatever, we would want a qualified individual to go take a look and verify that the requirements are being met.
Yeah. And so I think there are these opportunities we're going to use to help ensure that this code is being applied correctly. So, we'll continue to find creative ways to do that, but I do think the rules that we've written help support us utilizing our resources to the best of their extent. So with that, I think we've probably covered everything in the short amount of time that we have today. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure to communicate out to the people that are listening?
Well, one of the things that I have planned is that the Wildfire Resiliency Code unit, and I would meet with our educators and the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board administrator at least bi-weekly to go over those things that we see, and so we see that may not work well, that need better wording in the code, so that when the next code edition comes out, the administrator has a basis to ask for changes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think we're going to have to be able to adapt and evolve as we start to enforce this code and learn the ins and outs and all those nuances that maybe we already have a good handle on with the fire code and the building code, but we're just starting out with this one. And that's not just for our team, but that's for the entire state. And so you make a really good point that we're going to have to be able to make adjustments as we go. And I think that's some of the brilliance behind this code board, is that they will be reviewing this code and making adjustments every 3 years. And so I think our team is going to be able to feed a lot into that and help point out those areas that need to be adjusted. So good point, Bill. Anything else?
Nothing I can think of other than the fact that we've had a very high quality of applicants for the positions. We're going to be going into another hiring stint, another posting of the position here shortly. We already have the unit chief and inspector coming on board, and so we'll be looking for 4 more individuals in the next month or so, next couple of weeks. Depends on when the posting goes up.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to see the next round of candidates. Like you said, this first round, we had some tremendous candidates, and I'm excited for those that we've made offers to. And I can't wait for all of our stakeholders to meet them. And I really can't wait to see all the difference that they make in our local communities. So, well, Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate all your insights, and I appreciate your willingness to talk through this with me and share all this information with our listeners. So with that, you've been listening to Fire Talks with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. My name is Chris Brunette. I have been joined here today by Bill Bischoff with our Building Codes branch. Thanks for listening, and take care.